7, House of Commons Standing Committee on Government Operations and Estimates, of course known four corners of the world as the mighty OGO. We're continuing our CER review today. We've got Finance and FinTrack and D&D with us. Before we start, though, just a gentle reminder, keep your headsets away from your microphones. Don't touch the microphones. And also don't crinkle paper or fold paper, etc., near the microphones. We have an opening statement, I understand, from Mr. Blanchette. The floor is yours for 5 minutes, and then we'll go to Mr. Moore for 5 minutes. The floor is yours, Mr. Blanchette.
Thank you, Chair. Merci, Monsieur le Président. I would like to thank the committee for the invitation to appear before you today. My name is Philippe Blanchette. I'm here to represent Financial Transaction and Report Analysis Centre of Canada, better known as FinTrack. I am the Deputy Director responsible for corporate services.
Je suis désolée, Monsieur le Président.
Mr. Chair, I apologize. I know the interpreter is doing her work. Maybe it's just me. I don't hear her. Do you hear the French?
No problem.
Start from the top, Mr. Blanchette, please.
From the top. Thank you. I'd like to thank the committee for the invitation to appear before you today. My name is Philippe Blanchette. I'm here to represent Financial Transaction and Report Analysis Centre of Canada, better known as FinTrack. I am the Deputy Director responsible of corporate services, as well as Chief Financial Officer and Chief Human Resource Officer. I would like to acknowledge that I am speaking to you from the traditional and ceded territory of the Anishinaabe Algonquin peoples. I am pleased to appear alongside my colleagues from the Department of Finance to provide testimony for the committee's study on the comprehensive expenditure review and FinTrack's response to this process. Comme vous le savez, CANAF joue un rôle important dans le
As you know, FinTrack plays an important role in Canada's fight against money laundering and terrorist financing. We have a dual mandate for Canada. We are the entity that fights money laundering, and we are the Financial Intelligence Unit. FinTrack serves as a bridge for a wide range of private sector entities, law enforcement agencies, and international partners in the fight against money laundering, terrorist financing, and threats to Canada's security. FinTrack is not responsible for law enforcement or conducting investigations. Therefore, we do not at all investigate money laundering or terrorist financing, nor do we lay charges for crimes of this nature. Our legislation requires us to maintain independence from entities responsible for law enforcement and prosecution.
Comprehensive expenditure review. As with other organizations, FinTrack has undertaken the process to identify savings measures that were identified in the budget 2025. Prior to the announcement, we prioritized resources towards delivering on our core mandate, optimizing our processes, and strengthening our organizational culture. Following the announcement of the expenditure review, our focus was on maximizing the value of the Centre's corporate expenditures, including travel and administrative expenses, and enabling functions to ensure that they're efficiently and effectively supporting our core programs. The Centre's saving measures are also critical in supporting FinTrack's broader modernization initiative, providing the Centre with the flexibility to redirect resources towards the tools, technology, and capability needed to remain at the forefront of combating crime. During our implementation of the comprehensive expenditure review, we were deliberate in ensuring that savings measures did not affect or do not affect operational programs and responsibilities. And we were also able to effectively carry out our core mandate. It is important to note that this review did not affect the funding that FinTrack received through its cost-recovered funding for its supervisory activities, which is representing 60% of FinTrack's total budget. In fact, with a significant increase in our supervisory-related resource over the next 2 years, we aim to significantly strengthen our supervisory program. These increases under our FinTrack's cost recovery model are being directed exclusively to strengthen and modernize FinTrack's supervisory function in response to a rapidly expanding and increasing complex regulated population, heightened financial crime risk, and new legislative requirements. We will invest in resources to support supervision in the highest risk sectors, respond to emerging threats, provide foundational technology enabling functions, and tools to make FINTRAC a more nimble and responsive regulator. Separate from the cost recovery model, over the past 6 years, the Government of Canada has invested $175 million in FINTRAC's operations in recognition of our critical role in combating money laundering and terrorist financing, activity financing. This funding is being used to modernize the center's tool and implement new digital technology to receive, analyze, and assess information to generate actionable and financial intelligence. And in the last 6 years, it has further supported the addition of 65 employees on an ongoing basis. On reconnaît que CANAF est de plus en plus sollicité pour
We recognize that FINTRAC is increasingly called upon to address national priorities, including the fight against fentanyl, extortion, cartels, vehicle theft, terrorist organizations, and other forms of emerging criminal threats. I want to reassure committee members and the public. FINTRAC has the capabilities, expertise, and legislative tools necessary to effectively fulfill its oversight and intelligence responsibilities. We are at the forefront of the fight against these crimes thanks to our unique expertise in tracing the flow of money with the goal of ensuring the integrity of Canada's financial system and the safety of its people. Thank you. I look forward to answering your questions.
Mr. Moore, 5 minutes, please.
Bonjour à tous, and good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Thank you for inviting us today to present our comprehensive expenditure review on behalf of the Department for National Defence. Today, I am joined by Assistant Deputy Minister of HR Civilian, René de Beauveau, and National Defence was given a target last year of a $460 million annual saving through the comprehensive expenditure review exercise. This is based on 2% of our Vote 1 and Vote 10 allocations. The reduction across the department has been developed through a comprehensive efficiency program covering a number of different initiatives to achieve these ongoing savings. In particular, retiring selected fleets that are nearing the end of their service lives, streamlining the real property portfolio through the divestment of underutilised and surplus properties, expanding the use of energy performance contracts across our infrastructure, both increasing energy efficiency but also reducing greenhouse gases, and finally modernising our internal business processes and our governance to reduce the administrative burdens and address any efficiencies identified. The department is experiencing a period of significant growth over the last year, with a 35% increase in our authorities of $12.3 billion. This follows the announcement last summer of a significant increase in order to meet the NATO 2% of GDP target. In order to deliver these priorities, no job losses are anticipated because of a comprehensive expenditure review savings, and any personnel who may be affected by proposed changes in our organisation would be repositioned towards high priority work. As you are aware, the Canadian Coast Guard transitioned to DND on the 2nd of September 2025. The Canadian Coast Guard completed an analysis of potential spending reduction measures. However, a decision on the Canadian Coast Guard's proposals has not yet been finalised. Together, National Defence, including the Canadian Coast Guard, will continue to explore cost savings, looking for opportunities for greater alignment of project delivery and acquisitions, also looking at the use of shared infrastructure, logistics, warehousing, and specialised technical services across our two organisations. The department remains committed to continuously identifying and realising efficiencies across its programmes and its projects, ensuring that effort and resources are focused where they deliver greatest value for the taxpayer and enhance our military capabilities. My colleagues and I would be pleased to address any questions or comments you may have. Thank you. Merci beaucoup.
Thanks very much. We'll start with Mrs. Jansen for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Blanchette. British Columbia is facing a very serious organized crime problem. In Surrey alone, there have been 87 reported extortion cases this year, and it's only April. Behind those numbers are shootings, arsons, and business owners being pressured out of the communities that they built. These are coordinated transnational networks operating with increasing aggression. Now, Minister Champagne has been touring the country promoting the Liberals' follow the money strategy as the answer, even though you are told by the Liberals to make cuts to your ability to produce financial intelligence. How are making these cuts going to help you deliver on that follow the money strategy and stay ahead of these networks?
Thank you for the questions. So and I want to reiterate that through the SUR for us, the maximum ongoing cost was about $6 million. We were able to achieve those savings just by reviewing our corporate expenditure and the way we were doing business in terms of supporting the programs. No cuts at all. We're done internally. We were able to do this exercise without cutting no FTE, which no employee, or no operating expenditure in terms of our program, which means our financial intelligence unit has had zero reduction in costs in this exercise, as well as our supervisory function, as they are covered through another method of finance.
What does that mean, they're covered by another method of finance? Is this a bit of a shell game?
No, so our supervisory program are cost recovered, which means that they're treated differently, and the cost expenditure review did not require us to find savings or find and remit any money in terms of cost recovery, because this is money that is paid by our reporting entities. So we have 60% of our budget that is cost recovered through the regulated entities that we have in our legislation.
But I understand from your documents that you actually talk about basically you're shrinking your operational footprint. The wording was about your financial intelligence. You're gonna shrink the financial intelligence. Now, the Cullen Commission documented how these networks work. FinTrack reports confirm it. Underground banking, real estate casinos, money service business, crypto. We know the channels. We know the money moves. We know that we have to stay ahead with our enforcement. And that knowledge is only useful if FinTrack gives it to police. Your disclosures are what give police an ability to open those investigations. If FinTrack's cutting funding for the production and dissemination of financial intelligence, doesn't that mean fewer files and fewer information for the police? And actually, less safety for Canadians?
I just want to reconfirm that we have not cut any program operation in terms of our financial intelligence unit. So
Your
I'm not sure in
document
which
your document actually says you're cutting funding for the production and dissemination of financial intelligence. That's what the document says.
Okay, so I don't know which document you're looking at, but I can confirm we've cut into, and I can reconfirm where we've cut. We've cut into four different buckets. And just to give you an example, so we separated our stuff into four buckets, which was operating expenditure.
I'm just going to say it's the documents, the CER documents that went to the PBO. That's where it says you're cutting exactly the intelligence funding that's needed.
No, so we've cut into four places. There was four buckets: streamlining operation costs across key function, which was specifically focused on travel and expenditures, so cost of operation. Workforce optimization, which was specifically focused on enabling function, HR, finance, comms, etc. The third bucket was refocus on our MIT resource, so we've reorganized that unit in order to find findings.
My time's really short. I have to say, like, if your documents that went to the PBO were incorrect, I think that's something that needs to be figured out. But secondly, Minister Champagne's going around the country promoting this Liberal follow the money strategy. I saw that you're actually going to be requiring and requesting more money elsewhere. And to me, that's a shell game. Like, the Liberals are saying we're going to save here, but we're going to ask for more money here. And I think that Canadians should understand that we were told in the election that we were going to save money, and now in actual fact, we're just doing a little shell game. We're going to show a little bit of change over here while we're asking for more money. And we should be making sure that we have sufficient funds, because this transnational stuff is incredibly dangerous, and it's going to become a problem for Canada. And so the shell game thing, you have to explain that to me. Why are we doing that?
And thank you for the question, but and that's one perspective, but I think it's we need to understand that our organization is financed with two different voted appropriation, and then we have a cost recovery mechanism on our supervisory function, which has significantly increased, and we are investing on our supervisory function. Our voted appropriation is where we found.
Just one more question then.
Yes.
You guys were very much a part of 200 cases that happened last year, 200 major investigations. Are you telling me that you're going to be saving money on travel and you're going to be able to do a lot more of those investigations by saving money on travel?
So we saved money on travel in other parts of the organization, not impacting intelligence. And factually, in terms of, and we're trying to be agile to emerging threats. So the extortion is a good example, for example. We've increased our presence regionally in order to be able to help.
Less money? Is that how that works?
That is our time, I'm afraid. Past our time. Mr. Gasparo, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you all for your service. In our globalized world, international conflicts are no longer just fought on the battlefield. They are fought on economic terms. This illicit financing through digital assets, and I'm being quite specific here around Iranian-backed crypto, threaten the safety of Canadians and the integrity of our financial system. Canada has strong rules for crypto platforms and money service businesses, including registration and reporting requirements overseen by FINTRAC. Our government is strengthening those tools by investing in resources, and authorities, FINTRAC needs to act quickly on suspicious transactions and unregistered platforms. As you all know, in Budget 2025, we announced the creation of the Canadian Financial Crimes Agency to help detect these threats. How do you foresee FINTRAC and the Financial Crimes Agency working together?
Thank you for the questions. So we're actually excited for the financial crime agencies because we're producing, we kept increasing the number of disclosure year after year. Last year, we produced about 2,200 disclosure of financial intelligence to our partners. Having a financial crime agencies that are present and have the mandate to investigate and be there on the ground means that there's more disclosures that will be used and looked upon, and our intelligence will be used moving forward. I see the collaboration between the two agencies as very positive, and which will bring us into which will allow us to really focus on trends, high risk, and answer to the almost, we've been talking about real time, being able to look at the intelligence in real time with the proper tool and being able to push that information as quickly as possible to our disclosure recipient. And the Financial Crime Agency for us will allow us to do that quickly because that will be their main mandate, and we'll be able to work together towards that.
Thank you for that, and I apologize. I probably should have started with with this question first. Can you explain to the committee and for the 6 people watching at home the difference between? Yeah, that's right, and mine as well. It depends. It depends if she's trying to sleep or not. The difference between FINTRAC and the Financial Crimes Agency.
Is a separate agency. We act at arm's length because we are receiving a mass amount of data from reporting entities, financial reporting entities. When we collect that data, and it remains to FINTRAC. We do the analysis. We analyze if there's trends, if there's commonality, if we have suspicion of, if those suspicious report amalgamated together through analysis gives us an indication that there might be a crime or something that could happen, then we share it with our disclosure recipient. Our disclosure recipient then becomes responsible to investigate and follow those reports that we've sent to them.
Great.
And the Financial Crime Agency will be an investigative, as far as I understand, it will be an investigative body.
Excellent, thank you. How much time do I have, Chair?
2 minutes.
Great. I'd like to move to Bill C2. There were some significant provisions in there that our new government placed to try to give FINTRAC and other departments greater intelligence powers. Unfortunately, Bill C2 was obstructed and delayed by the opposition at the time, and we now have Bill C22. I had to put that in there, Mr. Chair. Sorry. I apologize. Sort of. Sorry, not sorry, I guess. Can you speak to some of the provisions maybe that were in Bill C2 that you would like to see maybe in future legislation to help FINTRAC?
So William Kendall from the Department of Finance. I'm working on financial crime policy, so I think that I would be well placed to answer your question, and I'm pleased to do so. So as you correctly indicated, C2 had a number of measures to help fight financial crime. I think it's important to know, first off, many of those measures were brought into Bill C12 and have actually passed recently. Those measures, there's many of them, in fact, but to summarize, they strengthen the supervision, compliance, and enforcement of the businesses and professionals regulated for anti-money laundering and anti-terrorist financing purposes, the reporting entities that my colleague mentioned. Now, of course, if we're talking about financial intelligence, that comes from those reporting entities that are on the front lines of the transactions that are trying to enter the financial system. So it's very important that they take their responsibility seriously and that non-compliance is not treated as a cost of doing business. Now, those measures in C12 will address this part of the problem. Now, of course, there are other measures in C2. One other one that was passed was also on the supervisory side in C12, making FINTRAC a member of the Financial Institutions Supervisory Committee, which will allow it to share information with other federally regulated supervisory bodies, most notably OSFI, the Office of Superintendent of Financial Institutions, to better
Mr.
ensure
Kendall, I need
strong
you
regulation.
to wrap up.
Just to wrap up, the government still supports the other measures in C2 that weren't brought forward in C12. That's why some of them were mentioned specifically in Budget 2025 to provide flexibility to reintroduce them in a future legislative vehicle. And of course, that is the government's prerogative. Thank you very much.
Madam Gaudreau for 6, please.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. Mes
Thank you
questions.
very much, Mr. Chair. My questions will be for the Department of National Defense. At the outset, I'm the critic for veterans. So, of course, on a weekly basis, I meet with veterans and those who reach out to me directly as an MP. And they tell me, and it's been some time that I've been hearing this, that serving in the forces was a tradition from generation to generation. And what's happening now, and you'll see where I'm going with this, they tell me, seriously, with what we've experienced, what we are subjected to after serving, I don't want my children to enlist. How can we explain that decrease in trust at a time when we are trying to better equip ourselves at defense? I'd like to hear you on that.
Merci beaucoup pour votre
Thank you
question.
very much for your question. For more clarity, I will answer in English.
So I'm the Chief Financial Officer of the Department for National Defence. I'm clearly not the Chief of Defence Staff or the Vice, and so therefore that question would probably be better directed to her. But what I can assure you is a lot of work has been going on at the moment around improving recruitment and retention. And just last year, there was a very significant pay rise for all of our members, from 20% pay rise for the most junior members of the armed forces through to 8% for the most senior. That is part of the addressing some of the issues. There's also been an awful lot of work around sexual misconduct and around racism and all the other things, which are challenges for us as a society overall, but it's something which the military take very, very seriously. So it's disappointing to hear your feedback, but I'm also quite confident that over the last 18 months, very significant changes have been made and very significant improvements. The very last thing I would say is we're also investing very heavily in our capabilities and our infrastructure, including significant additional housing units, but also the tools for the job, for the capabilities which our military require in order to deal with this very challenging world.
Mais je vais vous expliquer ce qui se passe, en fait.
I'll explain what's happening. The Minister of Veterans Affairs really wants to help veterans, but here we see that there are budget cuts for veterans. So how can we ensure we have better services? Because now, with current studies, and it's important for you to know, we are raising issues with the PSRV LifeMark program. We're raising issues about that. It doesn't make any sense. That's why veterans tell us, look, you think that with all of the energy and capacity being directed for us to grow, and there are many veterans from Afghanistan. They're broken, they are hurt, and they've been abandoned. Are you aware of that?
So Veterans Affairs is a separate government department, and I think you're well aware of that. What I would say is that all of the expenditures of Veterans Affairs are included in the 2%. I think they were subject to the comprehensive expenditure review, but maybe their CFO would be better in answering those questions. Clearly, the armed forces, care very, very deeply about their veterans, and that is why a lot of the investment is going in there. Just last year, there was $7.86 billion paid for by Veterans Affairs for veterans' interests. That was included in the 2%.
Monsieur le Président,
Mr. Chair, we have before us the demonstration of the work. And I don't want to point a finger at you, but within the organization, they're working in silos. So departments don't talk to each other because I feel like I'm informing you of something, and that's serious. There have been questions in the House before yesterday, and the minister said, yes, we'll have an investigation, an independent inquiry to ensure that our veterans are not abandoned, and we often find them on the street. I'm shocked to hear this. So do you commit to holding meetings to find out and to prepare a concrete action plan with veterans? Because now it's nice to say it's not enough, but it needs to be shown. And the first thing to do would be to talk to each other. Do you commit to doing that?
I absolutely commit that we are talking to Veterans Affairs, and our Minister of National Defence is regularly in communication with their opposite number. I personally speak to the Chief Financial Officer of Veterans Affairs every few weeks, and certainly I've been working very closely with them. But I think you're asking me a question which is outside of my scope. This is a scope for the Minister of National Defence or for the Chief of Defence Staff.
merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
For 5, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to all of you for joining us today. I'm going to direct most of my questions to the Department of National Defense witnesses. So I'll start with Mr. Moore. Your department plans to save approximately $460 million each year during the expenditure review, as outlined in your departmental plan. By reducing some of your operating expenditures, will you be reducing the use of external consultants? And if the answer to that is yes, can you tell us by how much?
So absolutely. So we were also subject to the refocusing government spending cuts, which happened a few years ago. And there was a focus there around reducing the level of consultants. So what I can tell you is that over the last 2 years, we have reduced management consulting by $18 million, or 22%. We have reduced informatics services costs by $60 million, or 16%. And we've reduced temporary help services by $27 million, or 42%. Those are examples of costs which should be focused on in terms of efficiency. However, our engineering and architectural services have grown over the last 2 years because we are spending a lot more money on construction of warships and on the construction of other requirements for our infrastructure and our capabilities.
Thank you. So just to make sure I understand what you've just said, the reduction in your operating expenditures that have been identified in your departmental plan capture what's happened in the past, not necessarily what's happening going forward.
As I said at the start, over the last 12 months, we've actually spent an additional $12.3 billion. So we are in an environment where defence is spending considerably more money. However, we are very focused on ensuring that that money is being spent wisely and value for money for the taxpayer.
I'm going to stop you because my time is limited as well, and I'm going to assume that the answer to my question is yes. I want to ask you a question about your plan to retire selected fleets. Was this already underway prior to the expenditure review as well?
So we always are focused on the age of our fleets, and the older our fleets are, the more expensive they are to maintain and sustain. Just last year, the Commander of the Navy announced that he was going to be retiring 8 of the Kingston-class, just try and get it right, Kingston-class maritime coastal defence vessels. So that was a decision made after the Comprehensive Expenditure Review was put in place. We are still reviewing at the moment other of our capabilities, and in particular when we are starting to see new capabilities coming on stream. So you may be aware of submarines is now being considered by the Defence Investment Agency, and we would expect an announcement on that later this year. And that will be an opportunity for us to look at the 4 existing Victoria-class submarines, which are over 40 years old and are very expensive to maintain.
So again, just to clarify, it had already been identified that the fleet needed to be reduced, and that was going to be underway. Was it the Comprehensive Expenditure Review that just sped along the process?
I would say it's a combination of 2 things. To be frank, we've also seen an additional amount of money coming in, $12.3 billion, that allows us to invest in new capabilities, which will allow us to look at some of the older capabilities and say it is no longer appropriate to need those. And the priority, therefore, is on the new rather than on the old. The Comprehensive Expenditure Review happened at the same time as we announced the Kingston class.
Thank you. So in your plan to modernize governance practices and internal services, you mentioned the goal is to reduce administrative burdens, yet you also do not expect to have any reductions in any FTE positions. Can you explain that? Are there no middle managers or duplicative administrators that whose resources could be used elsewhere?
So maybe I'll kick off, and maybe Renee could come in as well. But
we only have about 20 seconds, so please be brief, Mr. Moore.
Sorry, Chair. So very, very quickly, an example is digital services. We are trying to modernise the digital services, and we believe that will reduce our cost by around 65 million or 650 staff. However, those staff will be redirected to other priorities.
Thanks. Ms. Rushworth.
Oui, thank you, Mr. President Chair. Monsieur Blanchette, I am from the riding of Nipissing Timiskaming, and we are the very proud home of the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre. And I was simply wondering if you could describe how they fit into the overall system framework that is fighting fraud and crime.
So the regime involves multiple partners and stakeholders. So we have disclosure recipients, we have regulated entity that we work with private-public partnerships. So it involves multiple partnerships. So they would be contributing in terms of we do lots of consultation, we do lots of partnership in terms of sharing trends, sharing what each of those partners are seeing on the ground. It also helps us inform for us our national risk assessment on how we determine intelligence products that we would provide in the public space, intelligence product that or supervisory products that we would provide to regulated entities. So that's how we would work together in terms of sharing information, informing our trends, and developing our products.
Please share that with them. Oh, pardon me. Yes, Mr. Reid. Oui.
Just very quickly to make note of the recent consultation on the anti-fraud strategy that was is just concluding actually I think today, and so the government is also thinking in respect of the financial sector more broadly, but also the telecommunications sector and digital platforms about anti-fraud and measures that could be taken from a consumer-focused perspective also. So that organization in particular would also be important in respect of that initiative.
For those comments, I will share them with them. I know they're very, very proud of the work they do, and they speak out on it. And if it's okay, Mr. Reid, I would simply like to ask a question from a finance perspective. I am a new MP, and for me, it's about understanding where we go from here with the CER, the Comprehensive Expenditure Review process. So what would be the sequence? What would be the next steps? Next phase, I guess, maybe a better way to define it in that particular process.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. I think it's a great question, and I'll just preface it by noting that my role in the financial sector branch is sort of focused in somewhat of a different area. That said, I think finance as a whole has taken a great effort and role in the overall review process. I think it's about implementation now, and so this was about finding efficiencies, taking a look, and I think it's the objective, as was demonstrating in this specific case, was to look about modernizing, duplication and overlap, where we could find efficiencies. It does ramp up over 3 years generally, and so now it's about implementation. It's about focusing on the results and finding those savings.
I can say that I've been very impressed with all the presentations that have come before this committee, and so as well, maybe a second question in that line: what would be going forward the responsibilities now between Finance Department and Treasury Board in terms of this next phase?
Thank you for that question, and I think that goes along the lines well about implementation. Treasury Board and the Treasury Board Secretariat work very closely with the CFOs of the organizations on more of a day-to-day basis, or a regular basis at least, and have a very detailed line of sight into expenditures at a more detailed level. And so those are very productive working relationships in which finance is very closely linked to understand implementation, reporting, and results.
Through this process, I discovered as well that the Finance Department is not necessarily a large department. But is that a fair statement?
That's a fair statement relative to many government departments. We are, in fact,
a lean,
small.
mean machine. But you've actually, I was reading that you've done some consolidation of functions through the CER process. You've looked at integrating policy and changing your team's roles and responsibilities. How do you anticipate that working moving forward?
Thanks for the question, and you're right. There have been some. There have been some organizational changes within finance that has been quite stable for a long time. In particular, the merging of two branches under one ADM and one associate assistant deputy minister. So those are big changes. But the activities within those two branches were very similar. It's our challenge function branches that work with departments across the government in respect of requests that feed into the budget process. And so this is a key part of the expenditure management system, but there are synergies there in terms of how the work is done. And so far, so good. I think we found our way. Yeah.
Well, I think my time is up on that note, so thank you. Merci.
Merci. Deux questions.
Thank you. Just 2 questions. I have 2.5 minutes. Regarding defense, when we talk about investments, I'm really concerned at the human level. When we talk about outdated housing, pollution near Bagotville, is there a concern? But are there actions that are being taken that should be happening soon?
So we have funding in ONSAF, One North Strong and Free, where we received considerable billions of dollars to actually invest in our infrastructure and including in our housing. So housing, we've had some big successes in the last year. In fact, actually also buying condo blocks where we can immediately get blocks in place for people to do housing. There's always going to be more to be done, and we have a long process around making sure that we align the housing needs across all of our bases and all of our wings, and including using private-public sector options. So we are now currently looking at an option where we could have a private-public sector approach to the housing.
J'apprécierais de nous tenir au courant.
Please keep us informed, because then you wouldn't have to come back, and then it would reassure us and reassure the people who are watching, especially veterans. They follow this committee closely. I have one question left regarding fraud. I was there in 2019, and we were really looking at the interpretation of the capacity at the legislative level to protect our private data. And now, over the last 6 years, I see that we've done very little. But since you are on the ground, do we have what is necessary to take action to manage fraud?
I can happy to start. Thank you for that question in respect of fraud and individual consumers and liability. Again, I would note the anti-fraud consultation strategy. So the government announced in Budget 25 that this was an important issue that multiple departments are coming together to think through, as it's a multifaceted issue. And there's a consultation paper, as I mentioned, that has been out, and I think you'll find in there some questions that officials and government are exploring around these issues. And do we have the right tools and capacity to appropriately raise awareness amongst consumers, but also protect, disrupt the fraud, and find mechanisms to potentially give people that are subject to fraud potentially back some of their loss. And so these are all live questions within the guards of that framework and strategy.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. To Department of National Defense, you mentioned that the Kingston-class maritime coastal defense vessels were part of the cost savings because you're going to be retiring those ships. What's the replacement for them?
So our Commander of the Navy is constantly working across what the best fleet requirements are needed for modern Navy. We are now investing billions of dollars in new warships through the River-class destroyer. We've also just finished the AOPS, the Arctic Offshore Patrol ships. So the maritime coastal defense vessel is on the radar for potentially seeking further funding in the future. But at the moment, the Navy is focused on its existing warships, the Halifax class, and also the AOPS.
Okay, I just was reading in the Ottawa Citizen this morning about the Continental Defense Corvette. Do you know when the RFI is going to be released for that?
So that is, as I said previously, that's another part of the overarching naval strategy. The Corvette is one element of that, is also the maritime coastal defense vessel is another element. No decisions have been taken on either of those assets at the moment. We are focused primarily at the moment on the River-class destroyer.
Okay. The quote from Vice Admiral Topshee was that my heart tells me I need it in 5 years, and we still don't know when the RFI is going to go out. Most likely the contract probably wouldn't even be awarded until 2030, and in here it mentions that the first ship would most likely not be operational until 2039. So, I mean, you're the finance guy. I mean, you're going to need some of this information, these details. Do you have a clear directive and a plan to get that RFI out so that way the Navy can get on with it? Because obviously the Vice Admiral is pretty clear about when they would like to see it.
So the Government of Canada provided an additional $9 billion last year for us, and that was allocated across a large number of different projects, and we have been very focused on delivering those. We are now developing up the 3.5% plan, which was the commitment the Prime Minister made last summer to NATO. That work has not been completed. So I would say that the Commander of the Navy is feeding into that work and conversations are going on at the moment with the Minister of National Defence, and we have to wait to see what the conclusion is of those in terms of prioritisation across all of the CAF requirements.
All right. Well, I hope that you're taking the words of the Vice Admiral and others quite seriously about the timelines that are needed to get these replacement vessels in line. We saw the government has claimed to have hit their 2% NATO commitment, which, you know, is laudable for sure. Are you familiar, though, with the departmental results for Department of National Defence?
So the departmental results are now being developed for the 25-26 financial year end. So the financial year end is now complete. It's on the 31st of March, and we are working through all of the PAYEs and other invoices at the end. We have exceeded the 2% target, but we are still not yet be in a position to finalise the annual accounts. Once the annual accounts are finalised, then the DRR is also finalised. So the DRR will be published later.
Sorry, my time is short here, but I just find it interesting when you look at the percentage of major new equipment spend and you compare that to the GDP increase. It doesn't quite seem to add up, right? So, I mean, I know there's been lots of fancy announcements and big commitments and promises of spend, but when you look at what's actually been spent on major new equipment, it doesn't quite line up to get us up to 2%. So how much of this 2% and greater is due to just, you know, swallowing in the Coast Guard and just kind of shuffling a few departments around, or just kind of fudging the lines a little bit to hit that 2%?
So when you look at the overarching accounts of the Department for National Defence, we spend about 33% of our money goes on people. About 19% go on professional services, which includes creating the warships and the other requirements we have. This is the first year that Canada has hit the NATO target of spending 20% of its entire money on capabilities. And, you know, when we start looking down that, we have the CMMA, the P-8 Poseidon, which is being constructed at the moment. We have the C-330 Huskies. All of this equipment is now coming into Canada. And in fact, the C-330 Husky are now 4 in the organization.
Is that my time?
That's our time. I'm sorry, we're going to finish up with Ms. Fancy. Can I just, a quick question. You just said the P-8 is coming in. I just read the P-8's been delayed further. And you just, unless I misheard, it sounded like you said it was coming into Canada or coming into service. Could you...
So I think I'd have to go back and check the actual details of exactly when it's being delivered. But
I don't think you should be informing committee if you don't know the actual details. And the P-8 has just been announced, has been delayed by a fair amount of time. So I think it's unfortunate you're coming to this committee stating something as fact when you just stated yourself you don't know the details. So I just ask that we stick to items that we are sure of. Madam Fancy, we'll finish with you, please.
Perfect. And yeah, let's talk about some hard and facts. I've got 4 questions today under 2 different themes. And the first fact I'd like to talk about is sometimes we look at financial crimes like extortion or cryptocurrency as a more urban issue. But a fact that's happened in my riding recently was, 80-year-old Gladys in my riding was, she just lost recently $30,000 in one of these schemes. So in rural communities, the coastal communities like mine in South Shore, St. Margaret's in Nova Scotia, access to financial literacy and fraud prevention resources can be very limited. So I want to know how FINTRAC, ensuring its anti-fraud efforts, will reach people like seniors, people like our seasonal workers, and our small business owners outside of those more urban centers.
I can start off, not necessarily, maybe you have something to add, but what FINTRAC does. The Financial Consumer Agency of Canada also runs a number of financial literacy programs and initiatives that are available for all Canadians, including on fraud prevention. Just to note again, that's one of the key tenets of the anti-fraud strategy that's under development, is awareness raising for all Canadians. But if there's anything specific.
For us, in terms of FINTRAC, what we do is we work with reporting entities in order to provide them with typology, with tips and tricks, how to determine what could be fraud so that they can report to us so that we can use that financial intelligence and then disclose to our recipients. So that's mostly who we are working with directly is our reporting entities.
Thank you. I just wanted to reminder that, sometimes it's not a financial issue. These are also social issues. The second theme that I'd like to get into is the U.S. administration has continued to claim that a major trade irritant is illicit financial funds directly related to drug trafficking. So last week, we know that Minister Champagne met with his American counterpart, Secretary Bessent, and discussed that sharing a shared goal to crack down on these criminals. So I'm wondering, in terms of like partnership collaboration, are you seeing an increased cross-border cooperation to help track down these illicit funds?
I can talk from a FinTrack perspective. We've always had a relationship with our partners internationally. FinCEN, for example, in the U.S. is a partner that we share back and forth intelligence, that we share typology. We also exchange on trends, what they see on the ground, and et cetera, and we do the same. So there's an active partnership there that I've never really ceased and have continued despite everything that's been going on. I will also say that we did FinTrack. The way we're positioning ourselves is to be agile, and when there's something that are popping up, we can move our teams and so forth. And one of the example is all the efforts that we've done in terms of the fight against the illegal fentanyl. Since last year, we redeployed existing resource, and we've brought them directly with our disclosure recipients so that they could be there here and then come back and keep our arm's length, but work really on what our disclosure recipient needed as far as information in order to combat illicit drugs.
Nice. My final question. Yeah, we ended up with the czar because of all of that, right? Also, there's been revocations of money service businesses and cryptocurrency exchanges that are at an all-time high. So I want to ask, showing that government is seriously tackling fraud and illegal financial flows, I want to know, how does this enforcement work follow that revocation?
So in terms of the MSB, we've done a lot of work actually since we've revoked registrations from more than 120 money services businesses since the start of the year. We've also issued about $200 million in penalties to money service businesses over the past 2 years in violation. And also legislative change, like having a universal enrollment and so forth, that we will implement will help us understand better all the money service business that are within our country so that we can identify risk right from the get-go, and then we can go in and ensure that they are following the supervisory requirements.
And I think that I only had 2 seconds left, so thank you, Chair. Thank you, witnesses.
Thank you for being with us today. I just have a couple of quick questions, if you don't mind. Mr. Kendall, you mentioned, to quote, the government still supports the other measures in C2 that were not brought forward in C12. Are those items purely what's in C22, or are there items in C2 that you're referring to that didn't make into C22 as well?
There are a few measures. I was referring to C22, but there are other measures.
To us, which ones you're referring to?
Sure, I'm pleased to do so.
Just send it in writing is fine.
I'm pleased to tell you right now.
Nope, put it in writing because I have to suspend.
Okay.
And I have another question. Mr. Moore, you mentioned like the CER savings are mostly fleet retirement and reduced property, I think. Could you just provide in writing to committee what is, I know you mentioned the Kingston class, but provide any other fleet retirement, but also the cost savings related, if you could break it out to such thing, as well as I think it's property that's being, or perhaps buildings that are being decommissioned, for lack of better words. Could you provide that to the committee? Wonderful. Thank you for being with us today. Really appreciate it, and some of the new information we heard from about FinTrack and cutting down on the money laundering and other issues. Greatly appreciate it. We'll suspend for 5 minutes as we bring in shared services in PSPC. We're suspended. session. Thanks, everyone, for your patience. Welcome back to our witnesses. We'll start. Mr. Davis, you've got an opening statement. Welcome back to OGO. Go ahead, please, sir.
Merci, Monsieur le Président, de me donner la...
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the opportunity to explain how Shared Services Canada will find savings through the Comprehensive Expenditure Review. Before I begin, I would like to acknowledge that we are gathered on the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe Nation.
Canada provides the Government of Canada shared IT foundation, such as networking, data centers, cloud services, digital tools, and cybersecurity, so the departments can deliver programs and services reliable and secure. Since 2016, SSC's funding has remained relatively flat, while demand, reliability, and complexity have increased. The department has absorbed inflationary pressures and rising demand by leveraging efficiencies and economies of scale. Although SSC's total appropriation in 2026-2027 is 25% higher than 2016-2017, this growth is driven by time-limited and targeted funding. In fact, once budgetary adjustment items and the previous refocusing government spending exercise is accounted for, SSC's base funding is lower than it was in 2016-2017. When combined with savings already delivered through refocusing government spending initiatives, the Comprehensive Expenditure Review reductions will significantly reduce SSC's available funding compared with earlier years. To make these changes, our approach was not to ask, how do we get to a number? Instead, we asked, what should we not be doing any longer? The review is not only a savings exercise for SSC, it is an opportunity to accelerate enterprise-level efficiencies through enterprise-wide solutions and by leveraging the department's collective purchasing power for the government as a whole. Under the Comprehensive Expenditure Review, SSC will achieve 15% savings over 3 years, an ongoing decrease of $318.5 million a year. We will do this by standardizing what we use, buying and managing technology as an enterprise, and improving how we deliver services. SSC is standardizing platforms and realigning enterprise software offerings to reflect current needs, eliminating non-essential fixed-line telephones in government buildings and deploying cost-effective soft phones to all workers. The department continues to review and consolidate contracts to reduce duplication, improve pricing, and better align spending with enterprise needs, as while strengthening in-house capacity to reduce reliance on external consultants and contractors for ongoing operations. Efforts to simplify the government's cloud footprint by consolidating over 287 cloud environments into SSC's enterprise cloud are ongoing. And we continue to consolidate by reducing the remaining 190 legacy data centers. SPC a mis en place un dispositif.
SSC has put in place strong governance of the review to provide oversight, to track progress, and to ensure accountability for results.
Concerne les services.
Regarding professional services, SSC required additional resources during the pandemic when we moved fast to support remote work. We are now back to pre-pandemic levels and stabilizing. Under the refocusing government spending initiative, SSC exceeded our savings target with an $81 million reduction in professional services since 2022-2023. And we plan to continue those reductions where feasible. In conclusion, the savings measures we're looking to implement will ensure sound financial management in a tightening fiscal environment by eliminating duplication, addressing lower value activities, and improving efficiency. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I welcome your questions.
Thanks, Mr. Davis. Mr. Hammond, please.
Bonjour, Monsieur le Président, et merci de
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for inviting me today. Let me begin by acknowledging that we are gathered on the unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe peoples. Joining me today is Kieran Hanspel, Assistant Deputy Minister, Human Resources Branch. I am pleased to be here today to discuss details of the comprehensive expenditure review contained in Budget 2025 as it pertains to Public Services and Procurement Canada. Public Services and Procurement Canada is committed to responsible stewardship of public funds by reducing operational inefficiencies and focusing on core mandates while continuing to deliver reliable services for Canadians. As part of meeting this commitment, PSPC is planning the following spending reductions as part of the comprehensive expenditure review. In the current fiscal year, 2026-2027, a reduction of $108.9 million. In 2027-2028, the reduction increases to $147 million. For 2028 to 2029, the reduction under the comprehensive expenditure review is expected to be $190.8 million. The number of full-time equivalent positions at PSPC is expected to decrease by 1,793 by fiscal year 2028-2029 through a combination of workforce adjustment, attrition, and other human resources measures. Mr. Chair, PSPC is taking a number of actions as part of the comprehensive expenditure review. The department is assessing programs and services it provides across government with the aim of reducing ongoing operational costs and improving delivery efficiency. The department is also working to increase the efficiency of its real property revolving fund, focusing on core mandates, modernizing operations, and eliminating duplicative functions.
2026, the Canadian General Standards Board has wound down its standards development operational activities, as this optional service will now be served via other accredited standards development organizations operating in Canada. There will be a reduction in funding to pilot and innovation projects for Laboratories Canada. PSPC is also reviewing its internal processes in order to reduce administrative requirements, streamline its management structure, and improve efficiencies. PSPC is also reducing spending on professional services and travel, as well as implementing the use of AI chatbots and self-service tools to improve service delivery. The implementation of these changes will be gradual and measured so that PSPC can continue to support government priorities and effectively deliver services in our role as a common service provider. Mr. Chair, before I take questions, I will quickly outline the processes taking place at PSPC regarding workforce adjustment. The department is undertaking a workforce reduction exercise, while at the same time taking all possible measures to minimize involuntary departures, always respecting the conditions of employment set within our collective agreements. PSPC has been leveraging normal attrition and voluntary departures as a means of reducing our workforce and will continue with this approach. In addition, the recently approved Early Retirement Incentive Program is expected to provide further flexibility and support in reducing the need for involuntary workforce adjustments. Mr. Chair, reorganizations within PSPC are already taking place in order for our workforce to be better aligned with priorities, more efficient, and more sustainable over time. During this period of change, PSPC will continue to provide the critical services of procurement, pay, pension, real property, and translation, among others, while supporting our people and maintaining our commitment to their health and well-being during this period of change and transformation. I'm happy to take your questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Hammond. We'll start with Mrs. Block for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to our witnesses for joining us today. My questions will be directed to those representing PSPC this morning or this afternoon. As you mentioned, your departmental plan states that PSPC is planning spending reductions of $445 million over the next 3 years. Did I understand that correctly?
So our reduction for related to comprehensive expenditure review is $190 million over 3 years.
So it's just the difference between the years that you highlighted, adding up to 190. Okay, that's good to know. And you mentioned you will be that you will be decreasing your full-time equivalents by 1,793, but you also mentioned the measures by which you will be doing that, and you mentioned other human resources measures. Could you tell us what those include, if not attrition and voluntary departure, what those would be?
Thank you very much for the question. So when we refer to other HR measures, we talk about, we talk about workforce adjustment, we talk about attrition. Other HR measures could include things like the early retirement incentive program that has been recently put in place by the Government of Canada. But I'll also perhaps turn to Kieran if she wants to add something more on that front.
Really quick.
Yes, sorry. We started our staffing control measures even before the SIR. We stopped the clock on turning terms into indeterminates. So we have been actioning very tight HR planning and managing through attrition.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Do these cuts affect all departments, or are there certain departments that will be affected more than others?
Thank you for the question. I assume when you refer to departments, you're talking about areas within PSPC
Areas within
properly.
PSPC.
So the reduction targets are across the department. There are certain areas where we focused more attention because, again, we were trying to align our resourcing and our proposals to focus on core government priorities. So areas like pay, for example, and pay processing are less affected than other parts of the organization where we had better opportunity to look at lower value activities and realign them into higher value areas.
Thank you. Which regions will be facing cuts? And how many in each region? Do you have those numbers?
Thank you very much for the question. I will turn, Kieran may have the numbers by region with her, but I can tell you the majority of the reductions related to comprehensive expenditure review are within the National Capital Region. That's where most of the reductions will be taking place, but there are some reductions that will be happening across the regions. Kieran, did you want to add something on regions?
Yes. So we looked at the impact of our SIR reductions, WFA reductions, and we compared it to a baseline of National Capital Region versus regions. We have a baseline of 60-40 split for the population, and then when we looked at the people who are being subject to WFA, the split is 86 to 14%. So the impact on the regions is fairly low, and in fact, if you break it down by regions, it's the breakdown is fairly it's under 10 people on average across the regions.
Do these cuts include the minister's office? Are you aware of any positions being cut in the minister's office?
Thank you for the question. So Minister's Office budgets are approved centrally through the Treasury Board, and they are managing those budgets. I am not aware of the changes that might be happening within the Minister's Office as a result of any adjustments to their budgets.
The plan also specifically highlights the new Buy Canadian procurement policy framework, which was announced last summer and is set for implementation in 2026-27. Including a new program to support small and medium-sized enterprises, which I believe is supposed to be launched this spring. What additional resources have been required to administer the Buy Canadian policy, if any?
For the question, and there was funding that was approved as part of Budget 2025 related to the Buy Canadian initiative. I don't have the number specifically in front of me. I was preparing more for a comprehensive expenditure review today, and the Buy Canadian was not part of our comprehensive expenditure review process. But we are back here at OGO for main estimates in a couple of weeks, and certainly I will be prepared to answer the question at that point if that's acceptable.
That's totally acceptable. Thank you. Chair, this is a great segue into me moving a motion that I have had, that I put on notice quite a number of weeks ago in regards to the Buy Canadian policy. And if I could read that motion now, I believe everybody would have received it at the time when it was put on notice.
Yeah, I'll get Mark to send it out again, though.
Okay. Would you like me to speak to it first?
Please, no,
and
go
then-
ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead and we'll send it.
Okay.
Okay.
Since the government announced their Buy Canadian policy last summer, there have been numerous articles related to the policy, more specifically, if it will actually accomplish the purpose for which it was created. And we have begun hearing from stakeholders, from a number of industries who are already identifying measures within the policy that need to be in change, including providing more clarity regarding the rules. And I think clarity is kindness for people who are looking to actually benefit from a policy like the Buy Canadian policy, which is why I put the motion on notice a number of weeks ago. Can I go ahead and read the motion now? That the committee undertake a study into the government's Buy Canadian policy for no less than 3 meetings, and that the committee invite PSPC officials to appear for the first meeting of the study, and the Minister of Government Transformation, Public Works and Procurement be invited to appear for 1 hour at the conclusion of the study.
Perfect. So it's just a 3-meeting motion for Study Buy Canada. Great. Ms. Rochford?
Oui, Mr. Chair. I was hoping that maybe we could suspend right now so that we could have a huddle to discuss. This is a new item that's just come forward, and so
Forward. It's been on notice for a month and a half.
but today, I mean, we have not. It's catching
No,
us by surprise, and so it would be greatly appreciated if we had the opportunity to just have a moment to discuss it. I think it would make for more informed
I understand what you're
discussion.
saying, and I appreciate that, and that it can be the practice when it's a matter at hand motion, but it has been on notice for a month and a half, and that's the whole point of putting it on notice. So you and your colleagues have time to discuss it for when they are tabled, but can we keep it to 2 minutes, please?
Yes.
It is a simple motion on some of the government's pushing, so
Okay.
I hope we can agree to do a simple study on it, and we'll get back quickly.
Yes.
Thanks.
Thank you.
We're suspended. Witnesses, I think we kind of have an answer. Ms. Rochford?
What did-
Back to you. Are your colleagues fine with this?
Yes,
And
my
we'll go ahead.
colleagues are fine with that. Thank
Wonderful.
you. Yes.
We'll adopt it on UC then. Thank you very much, Ms. Rochford. I sincerely appreciate that. We are now to... No. We're now with Mr. Gasparo, please, for 6 minutes.
Thank you very much. And I wanted to just pick up where my colleague left off on the Buy Canadian policy, and if you can just touch on it somewhat in regards to Budget 2025, how Budget 2025 addresses Public Service and Procurement Canada's measures to enhance efficiency as part of the CER will support the delivery of the Buy Canadian. Can you shed some light on it?
The question. So certainly as part of the comprehensive expenditure review exercise, we look to identify as many efficiencies as possible in our operations. Buy Canadian is a new initiative that has been proposed, and there are a number of areas where there will be focus to try to improve the procurement process particularly for some of our small and medium enterprises, as was noted by the other member. Again, I'm not the best person to be able to speak to this. It's a little bit beyond my area of expertise, and we are back in front of OGO in a couple of weeks, and we will have the Assistant Deputy Minister responsible for the Buy Canadian initiative to be able to speak to it.
At this committee, we've also discussed the use of artificial intelligence and how federal departments are beginning to implement it. How is PSPC planning to integrate AI into its operations and service delivery?
So thank you very much for the question, and we have been very focused on adopting some AI initiatives over the past year in particular, and actually maybe one of them that I will mention kind of ties in a little bit to the Buy Canadian side of things. So we did actually just recently launch a new AI chatbot, Procura, which is a procurement-related AI agent that is able to take questions and provide advice to external users on the procurement process. We've also been very involved in the GC Translate tool, which has recently been rolled out to Government of Canada departments, and that's an online translation tool that is also an AI-enabled tool. We're also looking at policy chatbots as well, internal to PSPC, to help support the policy interpretation within the department, and that helps us to reduce the number of resources that are focused on doing that particular research within the department.
And can you identify any current PSPC processes that you believe are causing unnecessary delays or negatively affecting service delivery for Canadians? And that obviously ties into some of the AI work you're doing as well.
Sure. Thank you for the question. And I think one of the areas that comes up quite often is procurement, and it's a very challenging process to navigate. And the department is taking steps, as I mentioned, looking at AI tools to help support businesses in that regard, to have better access to the information that they need in order to be able to participate in the procurement process.
So as you're identifying current processes that need modernizing, and you're integrating AI, how are you supporting public servants through this transition?
Well, thank you for the question, and we have obviously been supporting our employees as they transition. We've made available a number of AI tools internally. We have access to the Copilot tool within the Microsoft suite within the department, and we're certainly ensuring that our employees have access to that tool and are able to use it to effectively do their work and to help streamline some of the processes that they use in order to deliver for Canadians.
How much time, Chair? So if there are employees who, let's say, are less willing to sort of work with AI and upgrade some of their skills, have you noticed any significant uptake on the early retirement incentive program?
Thank you for the question. I can maybe turn to Kieran to give some more details around the ERI program and the take-up at PSPC. You obviously have seen in the news the overall take-up by the Government of Canada, and PSPC has also seen a number of applications come in from employees who may wish to be considered for that particular program. But Karen, I don't know if you want to add anything on that.
Yeah, we do have uptake on it, and we have put in place processes to ensure that we are reviewing the applications based on the 3 criteria that were determined by Treasury Board, and to make sure that we're aligned with that. And so far, it is the processes have already put into play, and we're reviewing the processes. The deadline is July 24th for the applications to close. So then it's after that we'll be able to get a clear sense of where the reductions will happen.
Thank you, Chair.
Beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. Mes questions sont...
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My questions are very specific. If you can't answer, I'd like to receive the answers later. How much does it cost concretely every year, the fact that we depend on American digital providers?
Moi, je pourrais commencer, je pense.
I can begin. That's an answer I would like to send in writing. There's a number of things. For Buy Canada, 81% of our suppliers are within the Buy Canada rule. Okay, because we're talking about Copilot and Microsoft. So I'd like to have the exact number. Who really controls our data? The government or providers, suppliers? I'll take that one too. It's us. I was at the Senate last week, and we talked about where our data are stored at the federal level. I'll correct myself a little bit because I was about, 86% of our data are in a federal data center handled by Shared Services Canada. The other 14%, am I specific enough in the percentages, are with cloud providers. Most of them are still within the Buy Canada rule. With the companies we were talking about, all of the data is in Canada in those situations as well. Even though it's an American or international provider, the data is here in Canada. Can we still mention that we depend on the digital giants for our federal services? I think generally speaking, it's true for many countries. That's a concern of mine. There's a question to be asked regarding our suppliers and providers. I'm thinking of our devices here. We have Apple, Microsoft, but there are other possible providers. Is it something you're looking at reviewing in procurement? We are working hard on that to try to help Canadian companies to gain market share, because it's interesting to look at that. We are working with Canadian suppliers to continue to build on what we have. So we're talking a lot about cuts to the public service, and at the same time, there's contracting. Why cut internally? There's our staff, knowledge, people who are worried. Yesterday at committee, we were talking about people who are in therapy because they have so much anxiety, waiting to see what will happen in September. So those examples, isn't it the contrary of what we wish to do, to be more efficient? Will we be cutting down on external contracts? We will use our external contracts for future benefits and avoid the history, the legacy. So for legacy systems that we had before, we're trying to offload those as quickly as possible.
I was just asking if you could ask the witness to speak louder. I'm not using the translation. I can't hear him.
Could you speak a bit closer to your microphone, Mr. Davis?
I've been told to have a big mouth from time to time, but apparently.
Please continue.
J'aimerais ça qu'on puisse faire la ventilation.
I'd like to have a breakdown of the real costs. What's less expensive? Is it having external consultants? We could talk about where that went wrong. Or in the short term, is it a need because there's internal expertise that's not accessible or available? Each situation is different. We have about 35 services. Some of them are really up-to-date, modern. Some are legacy, so there's a mix in that situation that we manage every day, but it's not easy. I still have a bit of time. I was at the Ethics Committee from 2019 to 2021, and we talked about privacy and how we manage it. We didn't legislate quickly. We met with different countries, including Estonia. You'll say they were involved in starting this up. But how is it that we are so far behind in 2026?
Encore là, je reviens au point.
Once again, it depends on the service. With some of them, we're up to date. There's the possibility that there's more agility with some countries, and we are moving forward. So if you had the opportunity to tell us at the legislative level, that's our role. So we've been slow because of prorogation, elections, but if there's an emergency, you need to tell us so that we can take action. Otherwise, what do we do? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Johnson, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Hammond. I'm going to ask my questions to you. Now, your department's pretty important. Public Services and Procurement Canada is kind of like the engine room of the government. It buys goods for departments, manages federal buildings, major assets, runs pay and pension systems for public servants, and lots more. But looking at your performance numbers, you're missing the mark on a number of things. And now, the simplest way that I could think to explain this is you're like a general contractor hired to run an entire home, not just one job, but everything. The renovations, the bills, the maintenance, even making sure everyone in the household gets paid properly. And right now, that contractor is already missing deadlines, going over budget, and not always delivering what was promised. In fact, by your own numbers, only about 6.5 out of 10 projects are being awarded on time, for example. Now, someone with a contractor who only gets 2 out of 3 jobs done on time wouldn't automatically think that the best way to get better results is to lay people off. So if you can cut hundreds of millions of dollars without reducing service, why were these efficiencies not implemented earlier?
Thank you very much for the question. And I think where this comes from is a little bit, we have now access to additional new technology that we may not have had access to before. So I talked a little bit about some of the AI work that we're doing. That is one area where we are focusing some attention, and that's helping us to achieve some efficiencies, particularly in our back office functions. We're also looking at streamlining and delayering at the management level in order to have a slightly more flatter organization and expand responsibilities at the executive level over our staff.
My next question is, how did the government, after years of underperformance and massive spending, suddenly discover that you could supposedly do that same work for so much less?
Thank you for the question. This is really about transforming the way we do our business, and we were given targets. We were asked to go back and look. We looked at those areas which were of a lower priority that we looked to reduce. So I mentioned one being the Canadian General Standards Board. It's an area that we have been operating for a number of years within PSPC, but there are also a number of other organizations that are doing this very similar work across the federal system. So we made the decision to discontinue that function within PSPC and achieve some savings.
Why would it have taken so long? Like, if you guys are double doing things, why did it take so long to find that savings?
Well, thank you for the question. I think this is an opportunity for us to really look closely at our finances and determine those areas which are of lower priority. And this exercise gave us that opportunity to really focus our attention on that.
So you're not regularly looking at that sort of thing? At how can you save money? Like, that's only suddenly now because you were told you had to look for savings?
Well, thank you for the question. No, we continuously look at ways to reallocate our budget within the department in order to focus on the highest priority areas for Canadians. And we do that process on an annual basis. When we go through our budget setting exercise within the department, we'll look at the areas that need the most attention.
Why did Canadians have to live with missed targets, higher deficit spending, causing increased inflation, And only now we're told that department can suddenly do the same work for less, that we're suddenly not going to be doubling up on things?
Well, thank you for the question. And we take our fiscal stewardship responsibilities as a department very seriously, and we look to find savings where we can and reallocate into the most highest priority areas.
It's happened in the past year then? Or has it been going on for quite some time?
This has been going on for some time. But again, as I mentioned, we haven't necessarily had access to new modern technology and tools that will enable us to become more efficient as we move forward.
And how much is it going to cost us to reduce these extra employees?
Well, thank you for the question, and we are going through the process of our reductions. We talked a lot about achieving targets through attrition, and we're doing as much as we can through that, and we have achieved some of our savings through attrition.
Do you have a cost?
We have estimated some of our costs. However, it is still based very much on assumptions at this point because we're still waiting for the outcome of things like the early retirement incentive, voluntary departure program, and other attrition that we expect over the next several months.
What is your estimate?
I'm sorry, I don't have that specifically in front of me, but I'd be happy to provide that number in writing.
And I guess my last question, I don't have a lot of time. Why should Canadians trust that service levels won't slip further when you're already failing to meet the goals that were set for you?
Thank you very much for the question. And as part of the comprehensive expenditure review exercise, we looked very carefully at the areas where we needed to deliver services to Canadians. So there are areas that we did not look to reduce in, and that's areas like our pay processing area, which is critical and is already experiencing delays. So we recognize that, and we didn't look to reduce in those areas. We focused on the areas where it was lower value tasks that we would be able to adjust and achieve efficiencies through new processes.
That's our time. Ms. Rochford.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just to reconcile here your answers with what you provided to Mr. Gasparo and now to Madame Jansen, and so a statement maybe from your answers to my colleagues, I'd like to be able to tell my constituents the following, and so I'd like to know if this is correct. I'd like to say to them that the PSPC targeted spending cuts will improve efficiency and service delivery for Canadians, for them, in my riding of Nipissing-Témiscamingue. Would that be correct?
Absolutely.
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 Okay.
PSPC is focused on achieving efficiencies through changes to business processes and implementing new technology to become more efficient and to deliver our services for less money.
Okay. Then, as well, in that same line, I'd like to make sure I understood correctly that I can confirm that the actions of PSPC is taking to support public servants, and I think I overheard you speak to that a moment ago, and also industry partners, that it will keep the disruptions during the transition to a minimum overall.
And absolutely, as we go to implement our CER reductions, we are taking a very cautious and methodical approach as we implement these to ensure that there is a continuance of services and not a deterioration in the services that we're providing to both our client departments as well as Canadians.
Okay, thank you for that. And Mr. Davis, just because I missed some of your answer, I hope you don't mind if I come back. I just wanted to make sure clarity on the issue of external consultants. And so basically, if you could just explain what you described to Madame Gaudreault in terms of what will be the practice going forward with IT consultants, and if there is a diminished role for IT consultants in the work you do, how does that impact the overall reliable IT services for the government and for Canadians?
Perfect. Thank you for the question. So when you look back through the refocusing government spending, the first tranche, and I said in my opening statements, we reduced by $81 million in professional services. And a good part of the professional services that were onboarded during the years of the pandemic escalated our use of professional services for surgical reasons to deploy the télétravail or working remotely and all those other capabilities. We've now modernized some of those services I mentioned to the other member. We've now completed those transactions, and now we're on a downward slope of returning now to fewer legacy systems and moving towards more modern systems that we've implemented throughout the pandemic when we were asked to go fast and enable things like remote working. And I'll just go to one point just to help my colleague. We at Shared Services Canada also do some procurement activities, and from a generative AI perspective, we've put in place recently for all government departments a generative AI tool that includes 3 Canadian vendors that enables all departments to leverage generative AI tools like the one my colleague mentioned, the Microsoft one, but there's a series of Canadian vendors as well in that mix, as well as we've developed internally a tool called CanChat, which we've deployed now on a Canadian hyperscaler to enable AI capabilities inside of the Government of Canada for all public servants. So collectively we work together, and collectively we're enabling public servants to be more efficient using AI tools.
Just on that note, as we move forward, how will you be able to measure the impact of AI tools on improved services and efficiency compared to actually what we have now?
In some cases, for my department, we're an enabler to other departments. So
Right.
we manage the infrastructure for ESDC, PSPC, and several other departments. So these tools will be really at the coalface to enable better service to Canadians ultimately. But we will utilize the tools internally for ourselves as a department to be more productive in primarily project management and a series of other transactional tools to enable better service internally to enable our departments and our partners to render better services to Canadians.
So through procurement, you provide advice to other departments on tools that they will be using from AI tools and other types of tools from an automation perspective, on whether those are the right tools and whether they're doing their job, in other words.
Yes, thank you for the question. In the example of the generative AI tool, where there are 5 different vendors in that space, we've started to use cases, and we're providing departments advice on, for this type of use case, this is the best type of tool. It will be done through a competitive process, but we're building a basket of, French and English, a pool, thank you, of capabilities that will enable departments to be informed as a buyer for the tools that can enable them to offer better services.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Right on time. Thanks. Madame Gaudreau.
Une question.
Okay, it's important to have trusted partners and common values. Does Canada commit to working with the European Union, which is turning to digital sovereignty? Is that what we're doing? Thank you for the question. Yes. We are working in a number of ways with other countries, with countries that are advanced a bit, less dependent on some vendors or countries to be more sovereign. Yes, absolutely. Okay. Mr. Chair, I'll take the time because I think there's been discussion and that we agree. On Monday, I tabled a motion so that the CEO of Canada Post would come see us for 2 hours. I have more and more calls coming in from people in my writing who are concerned, and we've heard that things are not satisfactory for people. So we all agree to have this meeting with the CEO of Canada Post.
We've all agreed that. Wonderful. So pass on UC. I think our amazing clerk has seen into the future and already made such steps. So we'll advise on a date available. Continue. You've got about a minute.
Excellent. Donc, Madame.
Excellent. My last question. How long does it take for an answer? My first round, there were a few that you would be getting back to me on. Do you commit to sending that by next week at the latest? We'll work hard on that. But I think so. I know you'll work hard, but will you submit them next week? Yes, absolutely. Great. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Please.
Thank you very much. I just want to follow up really quickly, Mr. Davis. You're talking about a list of different cloud and AI vendors and just a bunch of different tools that are now available to departments. I'm just wondering, can you just submit to this committee a list of all of the vendors for cloud, for AI, and the various tools that you have mentioned here today?
Thank you for the question. There are some active procurements in that cloud space, but yes, the ones that we have firm contracts with, absolutely, yes.
Okay, thank you. Really appreciate that. And just kind of building off of that separately, can you confirm that the cloud services that you are offering are solely located in Canada?
I'll respond and let me know if this is exactly what you're asking. The data that is being stored in the cloud provisioning that we procure on behalf of departments and they leverage our contracts, those cloud capabilities are housed in Canada, yes.
And only accessible by Canadians, like just making sure that they're very, very secure is what I'm at. Just because we've heard from shared services previously about the tens, if not hundreds of millions cyber attacks that happen daily to Canadian government servers. So I'm just really wanting to make sure that this is very secure and just what your level of confidence in that, I guess.
Confidence in the 20 billion a day cyber attacks we have?
Well, no, sorry. It's, yeah. Well, thankfully, very few of those have ever been successful, right? But I mean, just in the security and in that, that it's not going to be easily accessible, I guess, for people trying to prod into our system, right?
Sorry for the humor.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yes, we are secure.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate that. Mr. Hammond, I just want to switch over to you for a little bit here because you're the CFO for PSPC, correct? The Defense Investment Agency, how much money is allotted to the Defense Investment Agency? Do you know that number roughly off the top of your head?
So I can speak a little bit to the amount that was allocated to the Defense Investment Agency for last year, which was part of when it was part of PSPC as a special operating agency. So we allocated approximately $2.8 million related to the Joint Transition Office funding that PSPC had received previously, and that was specific to harmonize or I shouldn't say harmonize, to look at the procurement rules around defense procurement and look at ways to create efficiencies there. So that funding has been allocated to the DIA for last year. We also internally allocated another $5 million to help support the Defense Investment Agency as it was ramping up. They now are looking at what the ongoing resourcing requirements are associated with that. There was some funding that was approved as part of Budget 2025 that will start this year, and those resourcing will be determined in terms of what that organization looks like on a longer-term basis.
So do you, as CFO, then get to see what the requests for DIA are?
So we have supported the DIA as they prepare their requirements for moving forward. Yes.
Okay, so the reason why I'm asking is we heard previously that the Defense Investment Agency was not involved with the F-35, that it'd be outside of it, but we just heard from the minister on the 20th through the media that the Defense Investment Agency has actually been quite involved with the F-35 project. So I'm just curious to know, have you received any requests for funding for the Defense Investment Agency that would be related to the F-35?
Thank you for the question. I have not seen any specific funding requests related to that, but the way the funding model works for defense procurement, some of the funding related to those specific projects is funding that is provided from the Department of National Defense. I wouldn't necessarily have seen or been part of the conversations around the specific projects and the funding related to those. That's conversations between the Defense Investment Agency and Department of National Defense.
Okay, and then just building off of some other things that we have heard today. We know there's been lots of announcements about big money being put into defense. One article I read had it upwards of $500 billion. How fast and how readily is the Defense Investment Agency, through you, being able to, I guess, get that money, spend that money, and what controls do you have over that to make sure that it is not misappropriated?
Question, and the Defense Investment Agency.
Sorry, Mr. Hammond, we're past our time. Can you make it a real short response?
Yeah, absolutely, sure. So the Defense Investment Agency has been set up. They're in the process of transferring over the projects, and I think the framework around what they can deliver and the timing and associated pieces will be worked out over the coming months. But those questions may be better directed at the CEO and the CFO for the Defense Investment Agency, who are responsible for the specific projects.
Thanks. And we'll finish with Ms. Fancy, please.
Awesome. Thank you very much through you, Chair, and thank you everybody for coming today as witnesses. This has been really good testimony. I don't usually serve on this committee, so this was really opening my mind in terms of when I was preparing yesterday. I'd like to ask Mr. Hammond or Ms. Hanspel, whichever. I wanted to talk. You mentioned earlier regarding standard setting. So I want to see how we can keep our standards by also creating efficiencies. That's kind of the theme in my line of questioning today. So my first question was, why wasn't the authority for standard setting and that custodianship assigned to a specific standard development within the organization?
Question. So we did have an organization within PSPC that was looking after specific standards in certain areas, and there's, I think, about 70 approximately standards that that group was managing. They are going through the process of identifying the specific owners of those standards and liaising with those groups in order to determine where the best standard setting body will be to take over responsibility for them.
What are some of those standards specifically? You say there's so many. Could you give us some examples?
Sure. If you can bear with me for just a moment, it's in some specific areas, but it's around so dangerous goods, hazardous goods, things that PSPC is involved in its mandate.
Okay, thank you. I look forward to looking at what those standards are. How will you work with industry and government? So let's bridge the two together here. How will you work with industry and government departments to minimize this disruption and uncertainty with the closing of the CGSB?
Well, thank you very much for the question, and our colleagues that have responsibility for that group have been working very closely with those organizations that are impacted by this change, and they have been through some consultation and again continuing to work with those organizations that are using those standards to ensure that they understand where they can look to in order to have the ongoing support related to those.
And what are some examples of that? What are some of the concrete examples of working together within industry and yourselves with that program?
I'm afraid I don't have specific details on the types of some specific examples. However, I know that there are some ongoing conversations that happen with the key stakeholders associated with those standards.
Thank you. Could you explain how savings from, back office efficiencies are now reinvested into some of these frontline services that Canadians rely on?
Thank you for the question. So again, I would look within PSPC. We do make opportunities to realign our resourcing where we can, and so a good example is our pay processing area. So we are in the process of having to ensure that organization continues at a level that can support particularly operations as we go through WFA as a government as a whole. That has an impact on our pay processing. The funding associated with pay is not permanent funding. It tends to sunset, and we were anticipating a reduction in our resourcing going forward. We have made some decisions internally in order to reallocate some funding from other areas in order to support that area over the next several months.
And I've only got about a minute or so left. So high level in terms of procurement and whatever. I know, I'm a new MP as well. I know that whenever we're dealing with procurement, when we're doing tendering and whatnot, and we're always looking for efficiencies. I want to talk a little bit about like the locality. I come from a very rural area where sometimes we don't always have, when we're doing the tendering and products and materials, that it takes a little bit of extra time, money, and effort. So I'd like to know if you have any insight onto how can we make this more of like a local level to help help our own local economies, quite frankly. Thank you.
Well, thank you for the question. So within PSPC, we have regional offices, and we have individuals that are located in the regional office that are there to provide support to businesses that are located within the regions. I also mentioned earlier the Procura AI tool that has just recently been launched, and I think that will provide greater access to a number of constituents across the country.
Nice. Thank you very much. That was my time, I think.
That is your time. Well, you have 3 seconds.
Thank you for coming. Hey.
Your time's up now. Okay. Witnesses, thanks for being with us. Mr. Davis, I think we'll see you back in a couple weeks for 2 more sessions. So by then you'll have enough OGO points to get a free coffee at the back. So thank you very much for being with us today. Appreciate it. Next Tuesday, we are not meeting because we have the late fall economic update. And then Thursday, we have PCO, Gigi, and then Madame Gaudreau's witness, I believe. We're not sure. Anyways, if there's nothing else, we are adjourned.